Okay, let's jump into this deep dive. We've got a bunch of source material here you provided about something called White Network and WhiteRock.
Right.
And our job, like always, is to cut through the noise, get straight to the core ideas, give you the quick version.
Exactly. Think of us as just navigating through this specific info you've got for us. We're really zeroing in on the tech side, the architecture,
Mm.
and where things stand according to these documents.
Okay. And what we're seeing is apparently WhiteRock is building the underlying infrastructure for White Network.
That's the picture painted in the sources.
And White Network itself. The
Right.
sources describe it as a blockchain, but built with like multiple layers.
Mhm.
And there's an RWA platform, real world asset platform on top of that.
Right.
So let's maybe unpack this layered thing first. What's the basic idea there, according to the material?
What seems interesting here, based on these documents, is how they're splitting up the blockchain's work. It's not one big monolithic thing, but specific parts doing specific jobs. Integrated, though.
Okay, integrated components. So the sources highlight, I think, three main technical layers within the White Network blockchain itself. First one is WhiteBFT. What's that about?
WhiteBFT, yeah, that's presented as their consensus engine. Basically, the goal seems to be just raw speed and getting transactions confirmed, like finalized super fast.
How fast are we talking?
The sources mention targeting numbers like, over 200,000 transactions per second and near instant finality for blocks. It says the design is, inspired by things like hot stuff, but with their own tweaks.
Wow, over 200K TPS. That definitely jumps out. Clearly trying to solve that scalability problem we see a lot.
Hmm.
So WhiteBFT handles the agreement, the ordering. What about actually, doing the transactions, processing them?
Right. That's where WhiteDB comes in. That's described as the execution layer. So this is where the transactions that WhiteBFT agreed on actually get processed.
Huh.
The sources say it uses a parallel shard-aware model, which basically means it's built to handle non-conflicting transactions at the same time, potentially across different segments or shards. That's how they aim for high volume.
Parallel processing, okay.
And they mention apps can get data pretty efficiently, almost like a key value store, but still keeping everything cryptographically secure with, Merkle proofs and stuff.
So BFT orders, DB executes in parallel. Makes sense for speed. That parallel approach is, yeah, pretty critical for these kinds of systems. And then the third layer mentioned is WhiteLens. This one sounds tricky. It's trying to mix privacy and compliance.
Yeah, this one really hits on a tough question, doesn't it? How do you get user confidentiality and, regulatory needs on the same platform?
Yeah.
WhiteLens, as it's laid out in the sources, is supposedly their answer, using zero-knowledge proofs and some shielding techniques.
Zero knowledge proofs. That's the crypto magic where you prove something's true without showing the actual sensitive data, right?
Exactly that. The material claims wallets can attach encrypted attestations like your KYC status, maybe, but the smart contracts only see a yes or no, basically, not the private details.
Interesting.
And users supposedly get a choice, transact openly or use a privacy pool for some things. Regulators, the documents suggest, could potentially check compliance by looking at aggregated proof outputs. It's pitched as trying to avoid that classic privacy versus compliance trade-off.
So instead of by either, WhiteLens, based on the source material, aims for both,
Yeah.
using these attestations and ZK proofs. That's a pretty big technical promise described here.
Definitely. And if you tie it all together, the sources present this specific setup: WhiteBFT for speed, WhiteDB for parallel execution, WhiteLens for this privacy compliance mix as the technical heart of the White Network blockchain that WhiteRock is building.
Got it. Okay, so putting it all together, where does this whole White Network project stand right now, development-wise, according to the info you have?
Well, the sources are clear that it's still under active development.
Yeah.
They do mention a key target, though: a public testnet scheduled for Q2 2025.
Q2 2025 for a testnet. Okay.
Yeah.
So active development. Right. Just to quickly recap the main points from the source material for you. It lays out White Network's tech layers, WhiteBFT aiming for huge speed and fast finality, WhiteDB for parallel processing, and WhiteLens tackling that privacy compliance puzzle with ZK proofs. And crucially, the sources say this is all still being built, aiming for that Q2 2025 testnet. So understanding these specific technical ideas gives you a clearer picture of how this platform, as described, plans to handle some common industry challenges.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And that description of WhiteLens, how it proposes to handle the tension between keeping user data private and meeting regulatory needs using those attestations and proofs, that really stands out in the documentation provided.
Yeah, it does. Which kind of leads us to a final thought for you to chew on, something sparked by these sources we looked at today. Given this detailed technical plan for WhiteLens trying to blend privacy and compliance with ZK proofs and verifiable attestations, how might that specific approach, assuming it gets built as described, potentially shift how future digital platforms think about balancing user privacy against regulatory demands? Something to consider.